probably best to keep everybody muted. And if you want to ask a question, just unmute yourself and speak. Either easier again than using the chat. You could also try to use the chat. And I certainly welcome comments. A couple, was it last year I spoke to you about 2019 going to Kenya and Tanzania, and then I planned a subsequent trip for 2020, but that obviously didn't happen, in which I would do selections in 3 countries, Uganda, South Africa, and Zambia. So that could get postponed to 2021, but just because of scheduling, of lodges, of availability, and of needing to allow time for COVID tests between countries, I had to do it with 2 trips. So in June, the 24th of June, I believe it was, the 14th of June, my daughter and I left for Uganda, and then 10 days in Uganda. She went back. Had to go back to work. And then I continued on to one specific destination in South Africa in the Kalahari Desert, the Swallow Kalahari Lodge, and then came back. August the 14th, I went back to Africa and then spent 10 days in Zambia. And we'll be talking all about those countries. It'll be a combination of talk, it'll be some photos. We'll try to get some video working. Zoom is, of course, very picky about what it can do and what it can't do, but we'll give it all a try. But now what I'm going to do is try to start off the screen share right here, or share screen. And we'll go over to here. Actually, we'll go over to this one right here. Okay, so I'm just going to show you a Google Earth perspective. You're seeing Africa, correct, right now?
Yes.
Good, you're seeing Africa on one screen. I'm seeing you on my second screen, so it works. And again, just for the perspective, and you can follow my mouse right here. I should have made the mouse bigger, but I didn't. Last time I wrote about talked about being in Kenya and Tanzania. And essentially between Kenya and Tanzania, between this section right here, in Kenya it's called the Masai Mara. In Tanzania, it's called the Serengeti. It's one same ecosystem, and it's all part of the greater Rift Valley, which is coming down from Israel, down under the Red Sea, through here, and north it branches off, and we're going to have a branch going through western Uganda, and then down through parts of Democratic Republic of Congo, and then into Zambia, right here where the mouse is, where I was going to be, and that's where the Great Rift Valley ends. The next part of the journey went to this part of South Africa, which you can see right here is desert. That is the Kalahari Desert, and I've always wanted to go there since seeing it on Marlon Perkins' Wild Kingdom, which was a childhood favorite of viewing. And the Kalahari Desert spans parts of northwestern South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana. And this particular case, I was just in this part of South Africa. Johannesburg is here. It's a 400-mile flight from Johannesburg to Swallow Kalahari by private aircraft. And I will tell you, once you've flown a private jet, you do not want to fly commercial again. I mean, and we certainly investigated that in terms of flying private out of Teterboro, but it's $25,000 an hour for a private flight. So we decided United Airlines is just as good. But nonetheless, Swallow is right out here, and it is a private reserve, private resort. But we're going to start in general with Africa. And now, having been to 5 African countries, over 3 separate trips, I really have to open everything with what is unfortunately the tragedy that is Africa. The tragedy that is Africa was, and still remains, tribal warfare and rivalry between tribes, and the inabilities of many countries to be able to bridge the tribal gaps to form countries. But that was exacerbated by the colonial occupation and exploitation of Africa, because so many of these, virtually every country that you see was colonial. except perhaps for Liberia, which the US established under James Madison, remember, to try to give freed blacks a country to return to Africa, which probably wasn't so benevolent as we begin to look at history in a different light right now, because maybe it was a hope that all the blacks would go back to Africa. And I think that was probably in the back of the minds of many of these people of that particular period of American history. But that's yet another topic. Everything else was divided by the Belgians and the French, and then of course Ethiopia with Mussolini, and the Italians and the British. You can't forget the British, and you can't forget the Portuguese, Mozambique, and all of these countries were there to be exploited, and their people were exploited, their resources were exploited. Gradually, African countries attained their independence. But as they attained their independence, there was yet another form of exploitation, and that exploitation remains in many of these African countries, which is corrupt leadership, which exploits the people and exploits the resources, perhaps to the same extent or maybe even worse than the colonial forces exploited it. And because of that, all of the rivalries and the civil wars and the militias and the extremism. So all of this is part of the tragedy of Africa. And now there's yet another part of the tragedy of Africa, which is called the Chinese. I mentioned this in Kenya and Tanzania, particularly in Kenya with the Chinese rebuilding the infrastructure. So in all of these African countries, the US has basically abrogated any kind of worldwide role whatsoever. Worse over the last 4 years, but even up to that point, really minimal intervention and help to Africa, whereas the Chinese have come in and build the roads, they build the infrastructure. They then just decide, for this, of course, you can't pay back all of the money that we've advanced. So what are we going to do? We're just going to take all of your resources. There was an article in the New York Times within the last week or two about the Chinese in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is not exactly a democratic republic, but it's called the Democratic Republic of Congo. Formerly the Belgian Congo, and when you look at this, this is huge. Its big resource is cobalt. So the article talks about the Chinese exploiting the cobalt because the Democratic Republic of Congo can't pay back the loans to the Chinese. So we'll take your cobalt in return. What is cobalt used for? Batteries for electric vehicles. That's one of the major uses of cobalt right now. And so the Chinese are going to all the more gain the market in batteries for electric vehicles. Even in Uganda, where we're going to start our tour, the first thing you see coming out of the Entebbe airport is a big sign that says in English, CCCCC, which stands for Chinese Corporation for something. And then all over Entebbe and all over the capital of Kampala, apartment developments and everything is all in Chinese. And of course, Uganda can't possibly pay back the Chinese. Therefore, the Chinese have already seized ownership in the last 2 weeks of Entebbe Airport because they can't pay the loans back. The Ugandans tried to renegotiate the loan with China, but good luck with that. And Uganda's biggest resource is copper. So the Chinese are now trying to control and take complete control of Ugandan copper. And in the process, in Uganda particularly, there are large settlements of Chinese that are being settled there to take care of A, excess Chinese population, and B, to put technical advisors living throughout Uganda. And so that's all part of this. And we're going to move, though, from the tragedy of it to something that is a tragedy that we can prevent, and that African countries, to the best of their ability, are trying to prevent. And that is the loss of wildlife, the loss of habitat, the loss of nature, and trying as best as possible to offset the effects of climate change. And the Africans are well aware of this. And part of the reason, other than the absolute enjoyment and what I consider the religious experience of being in nature, Part of this is your tourist dollars support that conservation of ecosystems, animals, habitats, wildlife, and indeed of climate. So extraordinarily important. Uganda, you can see it borders the little country of Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, Ethiopia, South Sudan, and in the middle right here, Lake Victoria, which is the largest freshwater lake in Africa and abuts any number of these countries. And we're going to be starting there with Entebbe, and it's going to come up here in a second. Well, it was up here in a second. We're going to have to use a search function, okay? It's the only way we're going to do this. Entebbe, which we, of course, all know from July of 1976. That is the airport. You'll see, if I can ever get it working, at Sports Beach, there are still the hulks of the airplanes that the Israelis bombed when they bombed the airfield so that Idi Amin's Air Force couldn't follow them out. But that's there. There is supposedly the plane that was hijacked, but that is fake news. That plane was actually returned to Air France and lived out its life before it was junked. But it's good urban legend that there's an old Airbus Hulk sitting there that everybody says was the plane. We are moving in Uganda to Mabamba Bay, or the Mabamba Swamp. And we're going to think, and you'll see it when you see the pictures and see the video, we're going to think African Queen here. The main reason for that people go to Uganda, though, is because it's not a plains ecosystem by and large. It's a mountainous ecosystem, which consists of the main tourism of trekking wild chimpanzees and wild gorillas. And that's what Sarah and I, our daughter, did. We trekked wild chimpanzees, we trekked wild gorillas, and then we went in the middle of the island of, there's an island in the middle of Lake Victoria. There is a chimpanzee sanctuary established by Jane Goodall. We'll talk about that, and I will also turn on my fundraiser hat and solicit donations for that chimpanzee sanctuary. But what we're going to do is start with some images right now, and can you see pictures right now on your screen? And I'm going to go through a lot of these quickly rather than try to curate another collection. Some we're just going to skip. But basically, that's just one photo right here of that's what it is going through the Mabamba Swamp. And doesn't that look like African Queen? Because that's what it was. These are marshes that lead out into Lake Victoria. And we got stuck a couple of times, and you'll see the video of it. He did not have to get out of the boat. So, and even if he got out of the boat, I asked, and there are no leeches there. So the African Queen wasn't exactly accurate. No leeches. Crocodiles maybe, but no leeches, and some snakes, but no leeches. But that's the marshlands, and there are people that live in those marshlands as well. But the big tourist thing to try to see, and there's lily pads and birds and more birds and birds. And this is where I developed an interest in birds. I was not really interested in birds until the Uganda trip. Where so much water and so many birds, where you go basically to see this prehistoric looking creature called a shoebill, often called a shoebill stork, but it's not a stork. Related to a stork, they're about 4.5 feet tall. They have a huge wingspan. As you can see, the tip of his beak is really just a very sharp claw and will rip things to pieces, and it eats anything. And they're very hard to see. But basically on the tour, you get to see one shoebill. They take you through the marshes. You see a shoebill, then they take you back. I suppose we could have paid for more to get to see 2 shoebills, but we were tired and jet lagged, and 1 shoebill was enough. So we've got enough of him. But I mean, look at this weird prehistoric looking creature. There's his wingspan right there. I mean, if he's 4.5 feet tall, you can imagine what his wingspan is going to be. There our daughter grabbed a picture of me, and that's how the sausage got made. My right hand pocket's got a GoPro. There's a camera with a smaller lens that I'm using there, and then a camera with the larger lens that I have down on my knee. Shoe bell, shoe bell, shoe bell, shoe bell. These are waterfalls at a site that is close to the source of the Nile. It was not worth the hike up to the top of that waterfall, and it was a very strenuous hike that I really didn't need to do, but it was pretty. It's a sacred site to certain Ugandan tribes. Again, Uganda is very tribal, and like most countries, the tribes don't like each other. But birds. This is a pied kingfisher. Okay, and these are cormorants. Now look at I learned something about birds. You see the cormorant with his wings out. That in bird talk is called heralding, Heralding, where they basically dry out their wings and also allows them to get rid of parasites in their wings. And cormorants are around here. They're a common bird worldwide. Nothing special. There's a close-up of a cormorant heralding. Up, lots of monkeys. This is a vervet monkey wherever you are. And does anybody remember from the Kenya and Uganda, Kenya and Tanzania trip, what is the bracha that you say when you see a monkey? Baruch atah mishaneh habriot, who creates all different kinds of creatures. And you might want to ask, what did they know from monkeys in Eretz Yisrael when the Mishnah was written? Well, the Romans liked to capture animals. The Romans got animals from Africa, from the animal trade, and they were for Roman amusement. So there would have been lots of monkeys around in the Middle East, so people would have seen monkeys. No monkeys in the Middle East, but they would know that, and it was just so different and so amazing and so human-like that all the rabbis could think of was to say, Baruch atah mishaneh habriot. So next monkey that you see, and then there is a halacha, remember that you can't say a spurious bracha, a bracha levatala. So you only say that over the first monkey that you see. If you see a second monkey, you don't have to say the bracha. Very useful for when you are finding monkeys. Okay, vervets are everywhere. Another kingfisher. I'm going to run fast. That's a marabou stork. Now, what's neat about the marabou storks is that they migrate from southern Africa. They go up through Israel. So you'll have stork migrations through Israel of these storks, and then they'll find their way all the way to Eastern Europe, where these are the storks that nest in the chimneys of houses, if you've ever seen that before or seen the pictures. And they will start all the way in Eastern and Southern Africa. Stork again and marabous. Okay, so this is our daughter right here. This is Jinja, and let me find this for you on Google Earth. Right here. This is where the Nile. Let's get actually let's do a better search of it. This is where it's up here. This is where Lake Victoria, this is the source of the Nile right here, of the White Nile. The Blue Nile comes out of Ethiopia and they join together in the Sudan, but this is the source of the Nile River right here. It's a place called Jinja. And everybody's got to have their picture taken at the sign that says the source of the Nile, Jinja, the world's longest river. And that's where it starts. But the neat thing is fishing is is how these native populations live and support themselves. So just got something here of some fishermen here on the Nile. And notice these canoes are hollowed out logs of large trees like mahogany trees. So the poverty is extremely significant. Around Jinja, by the way, is the major industry of eastern Uganda, and that is growing sugarcane. And they supply most of the sugar to Eastern Africa, but the sugarcane factories are not owned by native Africans. They're owned by an Indian family that came during the British colonial period that established sugar fields and sugar refineries. They own it to this day, except for a brief period where Idi Amin expelled the Indian families and took charge of ownership of the sugar industry. After the overthrow of Idi Amin, the family came back. So this Indian family is still there. Now, the net result is the vegetarian Indian food in Uganda is excellent. But there are these Indian families that control that part of the economy. And fishermen, okay. Throughout Uganda, we have the Nile monitor lizard, and, they're everywhere. You just sort of watch where you step. They're not friendly. And this is the crested crane, which is the national bird of Uganda. And I'll have a lot of crested crane shots coming along here. And that's called a crested eagle. That is wild ginger. We're heading inland right now. And the natives grow this, and it's sold as a digestif. And apparently you boil that into a ginger tea, and it will settle your upset stomach. And in their folk medicine, it's a cure for stomach cancer. It probably is not. But again, that's folk medicine coinciding with Western medicine, and that's what's creating some COVID vaccine resistance in Africa, that even where the vaccines are present, and by the way, parenthetically, in June, everybody in the tourist industry in Uganda, South Africa, and Zambia were vaccinated, albeit AstraZeneca, but all vaccinated. But this was really sold to this day, and it is in the ginger family. Common, somebody adopted a baboon. This is an olive baboon and baby along the side of the road leading into interior Uganda to what is known as the Kibale National Park, where the chimpanzees are. We're going to really go fast right now. Baby baboon, I just like that. A baby and mama in the rain, because it is rainforest, so it rains. Hornbill bird, okay. Now this is in the Kibale National Forest. That's a giant snail that you'll find in the rainforest, also called jungle before. Hiking, there are two kinds of gorilla and chimpanzee trips that one can take. We took what is known as the habituation tours, where there's more walking and harder walking, but you're going with the rangers to find groups that you're habituating to be around humans, and you get 4 hours in habituation. In a non-habituation, you could walk for 4 hours, you find the habituated animals that will come over to you, but you can only get to stay with them for 1 hour. Probably in retrospect, we should have done the 1 hour, because in the 4 hour, you see fewer animals and they don't really, and they'll run away. So habituated tour is probably better than the non-habituated tour. But in the process, we did see, so this young chimpanzee here climbing the tree, and they estimate he's about 6 to 8 months old. Chimpanzees will live 50 to 60 years. They are mature around the age of 15. Chimpanzees and gorillas both share 98.7% of human DNA. Behaviorally, chimpanzees are probably a 2-year-old. So you just have to, you don't get near them, because you imagine a 2-year-old 5 times the strength of a human being. And again, in our mythology, we have it all wrong, because we are used to these cute little baby chimps. When they get older, their faces turn completely dark as opposed to the light face. And chimpanzees are warlike. They plot battles against other chimpanzees. They go on war panels. They are generally vegetarian, but they will sometimes eat small monkeys. And the one thing they definitely do is, after they have attacked, using strategies, usually draw them out, surround them, and then attack from all sides. After they attack and destroy another troop of chimpanzees, they eat them. So they're very warlike creatures, as opposed to the gorillas, which were portrayed as warlike because of King Kong. But the reality is the gorillas are very gentle creatures. So we're going to move to chimpanzees. There's a wide shot of him right here and making chimp face. This is a mama and young one right there. The rangers estimated that was about 3 years old, and they figure because she had a baby, and they weren't really familiar with her because she's not habituated, they figured she'd be about 17 or 18. And again, they will continue to have children, have babies until they're in their mid-30s. A wider shot of her. And a shot of Sarah. I just thought that was just a good daughter shot to get. And now we discovered 5 adult male chimpanzees. So I'm about 15, 20 feet from him right now. And he's just taking a nap. And according to the ranger, again, when you see 5 adult male chimpanzees, they're up to no good. They're prowling. It very well could be a war party. It could be food party. Most likely, he thought they were going to steal females from a neighboring troop. So that's a wider shot of him in the wild right here now. He's looking up at you. I'd like to say, when you look in the face of a higher primate, like a chimpanzee or gorilla, and you look at the eyes, you know they're processing. Something's going on there. When you look at a lion, he's only thinking, are you friend or are you food? But when you look at a chimpanzee, he's thinking, he said, you look like me, because they have self-awareness. If they see a reflection of themselves, they don't attack it as another animal. They know it's themselves, which is certainly a higher level of cognition. There are 2 of them right there together, and then they decide to do what chimpanzees do best in social hierarchy, is they groom each other, and they will then eat whatever fleas or insects they pull off of the other. See, he's got his finger in his mouth right there. He's just found a nice tasty parasite. And then they take a nap. And yeah, rudimentary communication. Chimps have a language. They have sign language, and language is developed culturally. So different troops of languages of chimps have developed different sign languages. Of course, there is the main chimp language, which was identified by Jane Goodall, and Jane Goodall calls it pant hoot, which goes and that is in every Jane Goodall presentation. There's a current documentary about Jane Goodall, which you can find on demand, and you can hear her doing pant hoot a lot better than I can do. We were also told on the trip, do not do pant hoot because you don't quite know what you're saying to them. You know, so they will understand you if you speak their language, but we don't understand their language. So don't talk to the chimpanzees in chimpanzee, please. And resting, and they're human-like, and it's, you know, look at that face, but also look at the feet. Look at the feet. That's feet. Chimpanzee feet are like hands. That's how they can climb like that. So they really have 4 hands. And there, okay, and then in the distance. And you see that tree? That's a mahogany tree that's just got some buttresses growing along it. Part of chimpanzee language is they drum on those trees. And that's how they let the rest of the troop know where they are, or certain drumming patterns will let them know whether they have found food, whether there are enemies or whatever. So that's all part of the language that they have evolved through drumming on these trees. And once you do that, you get your official chimpanzee trekking certificate from the Uganda Wildlife Authority. We got those, and we also got gorilla trekking certificates. Now, this is from our lodge in near the Kabali Forest. And I did a little panorama of this. This is just showing you out in the background this Oranzori Mountains, and those mountains on the other side are the Rift Valley. So we're in the mountains before the valley, but it's very lush and tropical. Uganda is right on the equator, so this lodge is probably 10 miles south of the equator, so the temperature is consistent throughout the year. About 75 degrees day and night throughout the year, and it can rain anytime because that's why they call it a rainforest. Let's see, I've got a chat here. How long did chimps live? 50 to 60 years, sometimes longer, but 60 years are not uncommon for a chimp. And again, opposite that, just a beautiful lake. And that lake is on the 1,000-shilling note of Uganda. So the 1,000-shilling note is about $10. Monarch butterflies, and they lay their eggs in elephant dung. More kingfishers, birds. Okay, it's called a martial eagle. This is leading into what's known as Queen Victoria National Park. Hippopotami like water, so a hippo is going to find water wherever a hippo can find water. I'm going to skip ahead and show you these creatures right here. That's a mongoose. Mongoose, by the way, could be in the Torah or certainly in rabbinic literature. There are three animals that are delineated for it. One's called a chulda, which also means a weasel because they're in the weasel family, bardalos or a mindras. And these are mentioned in the Talmud as well. So they were very likely mongoose in ancient Israel because certainly there are weasels. The Indian mongoose are the ones that attack cobras. These African mongoose do not attract cobras. They're there and habituated because they're part of a study from Oxford University on mongoose habitat, and they are collared, and you can see there is the banded mongoose project from University of Exeter. In Queen Elizabeth National Park, there are tagged lions, and these aren't just for research. The problem in Africa, or one of many African problems, is human-wildlife interaction. Villages are right at the edge of these parks, particularly in Uganda. So the lions are collared not so much for researchers to learn lion behavior, but to trigger alarms in the village if a lion is approaching. They know to make noise or do whatever they can to scare the lion off because the lion kills people and the lion kills their livestock. And lions, by the way, we're told, prefer domestic cattle to prey that they can hunt. First of all, it's no work. It's like any cat. It wants to work as little as possible. And second of all, apparently, beef is saltier than prey. So they like the saltier meat. So that's to drive the lions away, to find the lions, so the lions aren't killed. As I told you last time, in Africa, in 1960, the lion population of Africa was approximately 400,000. The lion population of all of Africa now is approximately 20,000. So seeing a lion anywhere in Africa is a very rare sight because
all of a sudden the sound went dead.
Sorry?
I fixed it for you once. You start touching things.
I didn't touch anything. It just went dead.
I don't know what to tell you, Ma.
Okay.
Don't be nasty.
So the same thing with elephants, by the way. Elephants won't cross a ditch. So they've dug ditches between
Put on your hearing
villages.
aids.
They've dug ditches between the villages and the park. So the elephants don't raid the villages because the elephants trample everything and then they eat everything and then they kill people. But also common and tagged are leopards. And you can see this leopard was right up by the two safari vehicles, and she's got a tag on her as well. Leopards are small. They only weigh about 90 pounds, but they are very powerful creatures, and to me, the most beautiful of all. Also in nearby was something called a Mawea Peninsula, which connects two lakes. And that lake was a beautiful thing to ride, particularly hippos. And when hippos fight, that's how hippos fight. They just open their jaws, and whoever's mouth is bigger is the one that tends to win the fight. Although sometimes it does come to blows and they hurt each other very much. very badly. More people are killed in Africa, by the way, by hippos than by anything else, elephants, snakes, anything, because you can't get between a hippo and the water. It will trample you if it sees a human between itself and the water. They live in the water. They come out at night to graze. We talked about baboons. This is what baboons like to do. They like to fight. And then they go back to grazing and grooming each other, and then they fight some more. But now we're going to move right along here to the more important. These are some more little monkeys in here, but the Bawindi impenetrable forest. We're at an
I don't know, my
altitude.
phone keeps going dead.
We're at an elevation of about 7,000 feet here in rainforest. And you've got rangers with guns, and that's the danger that would be found there would be forest elephants. So you shoot in the air to scare off an elephant. We didn't see any elephants. But basically, you're climbing up and down, and it's muddy. It can rain anytime. And you're at 7,000 feet trying to find the residents of the forest, the mountain gorillas. As I captioned that one, we're looking there. My daughter took this. There's a gorilla in that bush. And there he is. We don't have great shots because he's not habituated. So he was not going to come out and pose. He did scream and charge, and they mock charge, and then they go back to eating and they leave you alone. But it's not like in the habituated where the actual families will be there and will come up to you. So we just have some various gorillas right here. He's a male silverback. That's a real good shot of his face right here. He's a mature silverback. Again, they will live 50 or 60 years, and they estimate he's probably about 30 years old. And he is the leader of the troop. So there'll be the females, there'll be his children. He's very gentle. He's very gentle to his children. They only fight when they have to defend themselves or defend territories. They're not King Kong. They're not chimpanzees. We are descended, unfortunately, more from chimpanzees, and human behavior is more chimpanzee-like than gorilla-like. We'd be a much more docile species if we were descended more directly from gorillas than from chimpanzees. And there he is. And we'll have some video as we get to it. I decided to render him in black and white. And you can see the silverback as he gets down on all fours to walk away. And those big gorilla eyes that are thinking. By the way, anytime you're around the chimpanzees or the gorillas, even in non-COVID time, you have to be masked because they have no immunities whatsoever to respiratory diseases, and they can even die of a common cold. And that is one of his children up in the tree. That's a young one. And their feet are more human-like feet rather than chimpanzee feet that are hands. And then we're back to birds, and now all these foods. This is in the middle of Lake Victoria. There's Namba, N-G-A-M-B-A, Chimpanzee Sanctuary, established by Jane Goodall. It has about 52 chimpanzees that were either orphaned, rescued from the wildlife trade, or rescued from people that wanted to keep exotic pets, a la Michael Jackson. Chimpanzees are not pets. Do you remember a few years ago, this woman that had a pet chimpanzee and her friend came to visit and it tore her face off? Remember that story? Yeah, it was right, because these aren't pets. These Jane Goodall sanctuaries try to rescue these chimpanzees. And we've got some shots of them right here. So food, chimpanzee bread. Where is he now? This is our adopted chimpanzee, Mawa, our adopted chimp, and he's in timeout because he's a little bit ADD. So our daughter decided he's the chimp we wanted to adopt because she does a lot of special education work through the Oregon Department of Education. So she thought if she works with special education in school districts, she should also work with special education in chimpanzees. So this is Mawa, and you can see his feet right here. He tries to be the dominant male. He can't be. He loses every time, and then he beats everybody up, and he can't learn any tasks because he's just too ADD. And that's Malwa's again. That's the chimpanzee foot again, and you can see it's another hand. The chimpanzees live in a forest in an enclosed area, and part of the forest abutting on the lake. Optionally, they can go back at night through these passageways. They can go back at night to cages, but they don't have to spend the night in the cages. They can spend the night in the forest. They prefer to do that because they get fed. And what they have learned is they are given a bowl of chimpanzee porridge, which consists of sorghum, vitamins, and whatever else. The young woman on the right is a German veterinary student doing an internship there, because we stayed the night there. You can stay the night if you're a supporter. You can do an internship there if you're a scientist. There was also a scientist from UC Berkeley that was there studying behaviors, and they're making chimp porridge. And then what they do is they hand the bowls to the chimps, and the chimps drink the porridge. And the next course is going to be cabbage. But to get your cabbage, you have to give the bowl back. So they finish their porridge, they give the bowl back, except for one who likes to tease. She takes her bowl, she goes into a hammock, and then she laughs. And then they say, now give us your bowl back. And she laughs again and then brings the bowl back, and then they get their cabbage. But now you can look at this, look at the size of the chimpanzee hand as opposed to the human hand. And they're only 4.5 to 5 feet tall. They're just big animals. Now along Lake Victoria, we took a boat ride and they came down to the water's edge because they were being fed, of course. So here are some of the various chimpanzees. I cannot remember any of the names. Jane Goodall Facilities will give names to chimpanzees. That's the most behaviorists don't like that. He's got a name. He was hurt, by the way. There was a fight for dominance because a female came into heat, and he got hurt last week. I guess I get the updates from the sanctuary, and he got his arm cut. What happened when he got his arm cut? He walked up to the keepers and showed them his injured arm. I mean, so they have that dependence and that kind of intelligence. But this is along the shore of Lake Victoria, and he's just sort of there, and you can see those prehensile feet. And there's mama and baby and somebody else very intent. And there he is with some kind of salute, but look at those fingers. And he's thinking. And there she's begging because they're throwing food out. And look at the one all the way on the left. She's the oldest one in the sanctuary. She's 42. And they're going to live to about 50. Maybe they'll live to 60 in captivity. But you can see she's turned gray. And that's my favorite. Because either this one's a Kohen or a Bat Kohen, actually, or has watched Star Trek and is practicing the Vulcan salute. But I sent this to the sanctuary, and they sent it to a behaviorist. And they said, this shows self-awareness, because I've learned to do something with my fingers, and now I'm wondering what it is. So she is aware that these are my fingers, and I did something, and now what did I do? So again, fascinating creatures. Baby was a mistake. All the females are implanted with birth control devices subcutaneously, but it didn't work. And she was a lower ranking female that conceived. And that has started a lot of consternation in the troop, because the higher the rank you are, the more breeding rights you have. She didn't have breeding rights. So we'll see, she sticks next, that's a bird. She'll stick, that's another bird, birds, 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 birds. Okay, that's chimpanzee laugh. This is out in the exercise yard. That is the female. There is the dominant male. You can tell by the size, he's obviously had his COVID vaccine, but nonetheless, she sticks close to the dominant male, who is the father, for protection, because the other females will attack her for giving birth when it wasn't her turn. And I like this low shot of a monitor lizard because that is, looks like a dinosaur. Meanwhile, we're going to go to South Africa right now, to the Western Kalahari, to Tswalu, the private lodge. I'm starting with these guys because that's an oryx. In the Torah, it's called either a Dishon or a Re'em. Karnei Ra'im, the horns of the Ra'im. And if you look at that, that's a Yemenite shofar. The Yemenites love oryx horns for a shofar. And it's shown in Leviticus chapter 11 as one of the kosher animals because these are antelopes. They do have a cleft hoof and chew their cud. But the main thing of the Kalahari that I learned from Marlon Perkins are the meerkats. They're in the same family as the mongoose. And these are habituated meerkats, so you can get right up to them and you come out in the morning and there they are. They stand up first and they sun themselves. And then there's always a watch meerkat that will climb a tree or something because their predators are going to be birds of prey, martial eagles particularly, but birds of prey and hawks. And then on the ground, their major prey is, their major predators are going to be cobras. This was winter, so the cobras were hibernating, but we did track a cobra with the snake researcher on it because they have a couple of cobras that have implants in them that are trackers. And we found the cobra hole and we found the cobra skin, but decided it was better not to get the cobra angry and coax it out of its hole. But it's called a Cape cobra. And meerkats are very fearful of it, but they mob them and they drive the cobras away. They're called a mob of meerkats, by the way. It's maybe a flock of geese, but a mob of meerkats, and they dig. I'm moving fast. Kalahari lion. He's got a black mane. I just took that as a portrait of him, but this basically is the black mane Kalahari lion. There are two prides on this reserve of Swallow and 3 males that control both prides. This is a rare creature and a rare sighting on Swallow. It's a pangolin. There's a pangolin researcher. You can see he's tagged. So we walked about 2 miles in the middle of the night in the Kalahari, dodging holes to find the pangolin. These are rare. They're sold as for Chinese medicine. Their scales are for Chinese medicine. They're highly endangered and poachers try to steal them all the time. And this is possibly one of the vectors of COVID. One speculation was COVID may have been derived from pangolin because pangolin were being sold at that wet market in Wuhan. Only a speculation. Common in the Kalahari, but not anywhere else, is just the leopard and the cheetah, by the way, and he is the namer of the Torah. So he can be a namer, can be a cheetah or a leopard. They didn't make any distinction, but there were leopards and cheetah in the Negev. And now we're going to move over to Zambia, just because of lack of time. Okay. And it does not want to cooperate, of course. Never does. Never does. Okay. Zambia. Zambia, I stayed in the South Luangwa, Luangua. That was featured, by the way, if you have on cable, BBC America, and you can find it on demand. There is a series that BBC America did called Edens, E-D-E-N-S, as in Garden of Eden. And these are unspoiled wildernesses. The South Luangwa Valley, there's a long river through it, is one of the most unspoiled wildernesses left in the world. So I was at 2 lodges and something else that you can do in Zambia, which are walking safaris. So for 3 days, get up 5:30 in the morning, have breakfast around the campfire, and walk for several hours, dodging mostly elephants. They don't like you to be around them. The hippos are easier to dodge, and just walking and learning the ecosystems. But again, this is an example at the first lodge. This is sort of the rondavel where one stays. It's pretty deluxe accommodation. By the way, at night, these are iron bars that come down because there are lions in the camp at night. There were 3 lions outside of my rondavel the first night. But you know, it's certainly safe enough. Warthogs right in the camp as well. And warthogs are wonderful because they cut the grass for you. Now, I like this picture of a leopard that I got. I just stylized that. That sort of looks Chinese to me. And as an example, South Luangwa, walking safari. And I have just messed up everything up. Okay, there's a bug. There's a Mac bug here that we got to fix. Let's see if I can fix it right here. Okay, good. Okay, fix the bug. All right. Walking. You learn a lot by walking. This, anybody ever heard anybody know what the national bird of Israel is? It's this one, the hoopoe, the duchifat. But here he is in Zambia. He's duchifat in Hebrew. It's hoopoe in English, and it is the national bird of Israel. But now in the walking safari, you encounter all sorts of things. Like here is leopard climbing out of his tree. And again, you keep your distance and you don't make sudden moves, and cats won't attack you. Cats will attack anything that moves, whether it's a human or it's a string. And the great threat in a walking safari, and this is, I'm standing 25 feet from him, is elephant and calf. And, you know, if you just don't make threatening moves, the elephants won't bother you unless it's an adolescent male that is trying to feel his wild oats. In which case, one time we did have to shoot in the air to scare off the elephant, but he got scared off. But generally speaking, you just sort of avoid them. And we walk through dried riverbeds, and walking up from a dried riverbed, there comes an elephant. And they are matriarchal in herds. But something else you learn lots from walking. Like coming face to face with zebras and African buffalo. This is how kingfishers fish. They almost get vertical. They sort of look like that Osprey aircraft. And he gets like this, and then he dives straight down and he gets his bird. Now, there's a different variety of baboon in Zambia. This is a yellow baboon. He doesn't look like those olive baboons at all, but he looks like a great ape. He's sitting there and he's thinking about something. And a rare, peaceful moment for a baboon. This is a different kind of mongoose. This is a smooth mongoose as opposed to the striped mongoose that we saw. One of the major things to see in Zambia, of course, along the Luangwa, are birds. These are cranes, but the big bird to see, and I think these are gorgeous, these are the carmine bee-eaters. They migrate from southern Africa to Zambia to Central Africa in August and September. So we see those. In flight, they're just magnificent. There are about 5 different varieties of bee-eaters, and they nest in the cliffs of the Luangwa River. And you don't go swimming in the Luangwa River. It's also a danger to the locals that have to draw water from the river. Now they're just beginning to put pump wells in villages. I mean, the poverty is unimaginable. But when they had to go down to the river to draw water, this is one of the hazards that they would encounter. But now, famous. Her name is Olimba. She was featured on a PBS nature show, and you can find it on demand if you're a PBS member, called Leopard Legacy. And there are filmmakers, and they're still there, and I met them, had lunch with them one day. They did a 3-year tracking of this leopard named Olimba through various litters of cubs and husbands and spouses and fights and fight for survival. And she just had 2 cubs. She's 9 years old. We couldn't see the cubs. They were hidden too well. They had seen them earlier in the day, but she is famous. And everybody that comes to this part of the Luangwa has got to see Olimba. And there she is, and just a magnificent creature. And following, of course, Olimba is going to be the hyena to try to either steal the prey or at least get the leftovers. And that's the prey right there, the puku. Puku is an antelope. It weighs about 180 pounds full grown, and a leopard can take it down. It's like an impala. And there is Olimba with her cover blown. The puku sees her, so she is not going to attempt to outrun an antelope. Only a cheetah can try to outrun the antelope, and only in bursts. Leopards aren't that fast, and they're opportunistic hunters. They usually have to pounce. And hyena didn't get anything to eat either. So hyena says, I'm just going to curl up and wait. But from the looks of that stomach, that hyena is probably well fed. And by the way, they're not dogs and they're not cats. They branched off evolutionary before dogs and cats branched off from each other. So they have dog-like characteristics and they have cat-like characteristics. Look at the paw. The paw has multiple lobes. That's a cat, not a dog. Its snout is like a dog. Its genitalia are like a cat. They're a very different creature. Olimba is now just sitting down in a gully. And there she is. Look at the camouflage. Look, that's why a leopard has spots. Look at that camouflage, and she's in the gully. She can spot something at the top of the gully and run up and pounce. And just sky shots of Zambia and the ubiquitous hippo. And that's the same thing as here. That's a bunny. And I've just got maybe one more thing to show you if I can find it. Yes, something else very rare. And there was a den of them. These are African wild dogs, highly endangered. They are a predecessor to domestic dogs. And there are 18 of them in this den. There are 9 puppies. So these are the puppies. And according to the guides, this was the second time they've taken the puppies out of the den to show them how to hunt. But they didn't like it. Something was wrong. So when you see this picture, they were in the process of leading the puppies back to the den. They didn't feel secure. So this one's collared so they can track them. These are the size of German Shepherds, but look at the ears, all the better to hear. And that's a good tight shot of the African wild dogs. And you'll see though, look at the teeth. They are throughout Africa, but there are several dens of them in this part of the South Luangwa. And that's a nighttime shot, just a perspective shot. There is the moon coming out, full moon, when I was there, and the dogs and the edge of the forest. And the dogs, and we caught him at night. It's the only lion we saw in Luangwa. There is only one pride in that particular segment of the Luangwa where the camp was. And we saw one of the males. They said there were 3 males and about 10 females. Remember, as I said, a lion sighting is very rare in Africa. And that is a puku. The puku, by the way, you see that on his neck. That's how he attracts a mate. He secretes something, he rubs it on his neck, and that's puku perfume. And the male waits there. So what the male does is he has perfume. He finds a spot where there are leaves to eat, branches to eat, and water, and he stays there to attract a female because there's what she needs. There's water, there is something to eat, and there's a male puku. And that's how they try to attract mates. And that's called a Hammerkopf, hammerhead. So Yiddish or German, Hammerkopf, hammerhead. Weird looking bird, and that's in flight. But nonetheless, I did want to show you some of those, and what I'm going to attempt right now is to show you 4 minutes of video, and that will still take us to 1 hour from when we start. Oh, I just have to show you one more pretty bird right here. Those are lovebirds. They're not just something you buy in the pet store. They really are out there in the wild and in the wilderness. That's a lovebird. So now I'm just going to stop the share, and I'm going to go into share again. and I'm going to show a movie and narrate it. This starts off. Can you hear my voice as well? Just nod if you can hear me. Okay, that is African Queen. That's Mbamba Swamp. And you can see, like Bogey, he was pushing his way through the swamp. This is now hacking through the rainforest. This is what it was to trek for gorillas. Some of this was shot by our daughter, some by me. Video is not going to be that great on Zoom. That's what you're going through to find the gorillas. Hear that? In gorilla, that's how you say, may I enter your territory. So that's trying to keep the gorilla calm when you say, and that's one thing you were supposed to say, not mock chimp sounds, and there I am. And you see it's up, it's down, it's all muddy, it's covered with vines. The one thing they say is don't worry about the snakes, because the snakes sense your vibration and they slink away. So the snakes are there, but they don't want to bother you any more than you want to bother them. As I said, it used to be called the jungle, now we'll call it the rainforest. And we're at 7,000 foot elevation. And there he is. See him? Yes, lots of insects there. That's the best shot of him. And he just eats leaves all day. That's all he does. They never eat meat. They eat nothing but leaves. Now we're going to swallow, and just a little insight in lion life. No, that's chimpanzees. That's the sanctuary. They're 2-year-olds. It's like a kindergarten class. And then it gets quiet. And he's laughing. There's Bantu. And now a little insight into lion life from Swallow Kalahari. We were lucky to see this because lions sleep 22 hours a day. Cubs are playing. And there's the male. And he says, don't bother me. And she says, don't bother me. And there he is walking. Look at the size of that. It's just, it's an amazing sight. He was just walking toward us in the car. And there he's giving us a profile. And that is as much as I could get into 59 minutes of a little bit of the history, the ecosystems, the contemporary issues, as well as a taste of wildlife of different ecosystems. of the jungles of the forests and rainforests of Uganda, of the coastal marshes of Uganda, of the Kalahari Desert of South Africa, and of the South Luangwa Valley in Zambia. So there'll be more videos to come, and as I finish more videos, I certainly will let people know if anybody wants to view them. In the meantime, I encourage donations to the Ngamba Chimpanzee Sanctuary in Uganda. I encourage Africa tourism whenever is possible. It is a religious experience to me of the constant saying of Psalm 92, Ma gadlu ma'asecha Adonai, how great are your works, O God. And this really, I never seem to, I don't have enough of it, and I don't have enough inspiration that I possibly can even convey that I derive from it. But basically, that's sort of the introduction to it, and try to find some videos, try to find Leopard Legacy, try to find BBC Edens, and get a little bit more insight into some of the areas that I have shown you, and even into some of the animals that very animals that I have shown you. So thank you all today.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi Soltz. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you so much. It was really very interesting.
incredible tour.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. It was just wonderful. It was a wonderful experience, and thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
It
Been
was.
my pleasure. Been my pleasure. Let's see if
When you were so close to those animals, were you on foot or in a Jeep?
I was mostly in a Jeep, except for the 3 days in Uganda. I'm sorry, in South Africa, in Zambia, in the Luangwa. 3 days in the Luangwa. We did not encounter any lions. We encountered one leopard. That's because when the guide stopped, we have the porter carries tea. So we have to stop at 10 o'clock for tea, where he then gathers elephant dung and twigs to make a fire, to boil the kettle, to make that tea, or for Americans, for me, they brought French press coffee along. So I can get French press coffee in the bush in Zambia. Then he went into the bush to get some twigs, and there was a leopard there. So the leopard spooked, which they do, they'll spook, and the leopard immediately ran into a troop of baboons, which sent them into complete consternation, and baboons are leopards' favorite food. However, the leopard was so spooked, he just kept running and didn't pick off a baboon along the way. We did at one point say, the guide said, we're surrounded on 3 sides by elephants. So what we did was basically scurry down into a dried riverbed, walk single file silently downwind from the elephants. And then we were able to navigate our way through the elephants, because you never know with the elephants whether they will leave you alone or whether they won't leave you alone. They're unpredictable. They hate people. An elephant remembers something for 40 years. An elephant remembers a human face. There was a story in Uganda of a poacher who turned ranger. And so he's a ranger, not poaching anymore, but there was a troop of elephants that saw him, recognized him as a poacher, and charged. Even though he was wearing a ranger uniform, even though it had been years since he had been a poacher, the elephants remember. So they remember encounters with people, and they're generally not pleasant encounters with people. So but again, you know, other things like trying to identify the dung of animals, trying to identify the tracks, because when walking, you're actually seeing it from the perspective of the animal rather than from a Jeep. So that's the only place you can do that is Uganda. I'm sorry, Zambia, not Uganda. In Uganda, no walking at all, except for the gorillas and the chimpanzees, but no walking in plains and savanna areas. In Zambia, you can walk. And in South Africa, we walked only to see the pangolin. But then again, we were with a group. There were lots of light and walking sticks, and nobody twisted an ankle in the ruts and the holes. But it was about a 2-hour walk, 2-mile walk each way to find the pangolin. But a lot of it was on foot.
Incredible, incredible. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you,
This
Ned.
was quite
Oh,
a tour. Fantastic.
Thank you,
Yeah,
thank you,
thank you
Thank
for
you so
sharing it with
much.
us.
Thank you,
Yeah.
really enjoyed it.
I'm gonna stop the recording.
Okay.
How